So once upon a time, I don't remember what episode or what, but we talked a little bit about the idea of like the what if Bret Hart never left WWF in 1997. And I think I might have been even the one to call it the biggest what if in wrestling history. But I was
The clip,
listening.
by the way, that
Huh?
clip is on the YouTube page. So
Oh yeah, totally. I think that's one of the reasons why it reminded me of this. I might have like come across it, but I was also listening to one of JR's podcasts the other day, and I don't remember what they were talking about. It wasn't even really specifically about this thing, but it got me thinking about Steve Austin being injured. It might have even been something to wrestle. It was one of Conrad was on it. And I think they were talking about how when Austin got injured in 97, how the plan was still to keep him around as like an authority figure or something, like just something to keep the momentum going, which, as we know, like he never missed any TV time or anything. He was always there.
like Savio.
Right. I think that this actually ended up posing in my head a bigger what if, a bigger what if than what if Bret Hart had never left. Because, and I'll explain to you why I think it's a bigger what if. What if Steve Austin had never actually come back to wrestling after that neck injury in summer of 1997 when Owen Hart did the pile driver incorrectly, broke the man's neck? What if? Because there was a moment in time. You've heard Bruce Pritchard talk about this on his podcast. You've definitely heard JR say this before. Because whenever they talk about kind of the time and the frame and, Austin in general, there were questions of, is this guy going to even be able to come back to the ring? And what's crazy is, upon his return is when he really, really takes off. He comes back from that injury in August and goes on to win the Royal Rumble and goes on to win the title at WrestleMania from Shawn Michaels, goes on to have the feud with Mr. McMahon and that whole 9 yards. All of that happens after he comes back. What if Steve Austin never came back? What do you guys think would have been the overall repercussions on pro wrestling as a whole? I mean, WWF, obviously, but might have there been repercussions for WCW? Might they still be the company that's in business right now and not necessarily WWF? I mean, it's pretty well known that WWF was pretty much on the verge of bankruptcy at the time when they took a bet on putting Mike Tyson out there and Austin Tyson. Austin Tyson was a thing, and it got eyes and it got viewers. And Granted, could that have still been a thing even if Austin couldn't have come back to wrestling, since it's not like they ever had a wrestling match? Could you have still had those personalities clashing and like just had them in separate corners at WrestleMania or something? So maybe that still wouldn't have been necessarily affected, and WWE would have still been able to make the money that they did. But at the end of the day, Steve Austin was a wrestler. Steve Austin was the world champion a couple of different times. Steve Austin was the main attraction. Nobody in pro wrestling is the main attraction without being in the ring as a wrestler. Nobody is that over. Paul Heyman is not the guy that sells tickets. Roman Reigns is. Brock Lesnar is. Paul Heyman's the guy in their corner. Nobody's buying the tickets to go see Paul Heyman. So would Steve Austin have actually had the effect that he did if he was never able to come back into the ring as a wrestler? I think I've explained it well enough. I would now like to hear from you guys.
It's funny because that same what if by Bret Hart is literally the same time. Because I think we were told that Bret was asked to void that contract, or told to void a contract around that same month that the injury happened. It's a different situation. That's a big. I agree with you. I still think WCW would have been in trouble. Maybe they still exist, but remember, they beat themselves. They ate themselves alive from the inside. Was that Vince beat them? That's not the case. But the first thing I go to is Bret Hart. It's because remember the Bret thing happened after the Austin injury. So if Austin says I can't go, I gotta retire, who does Vince lean on? It's always Bret. And at that point, it was still Bret. So, but the thing is, The Rock wasn't The Rock yet. They only just turned him heel that month. You know?
Yeah.
So that's a major crossroad. That, August 97, we talk about 97 being one of the most interesting and most biggest turning points in wrestling history for many reasons. You freeze frame August 97. I mean, and I'm glad you brought this up because that Austin injury could have, if that shit went sideways, yeah, we might not see WWE as it is today. Because it was Austin that propelled Austin. Say it again?
I still think we get there.
No, I think it will exist, but I think, remember,
a lot of people give Austin a lot of credit for the Attitude Era, but you also have to give a ton of credit to them letting Shawn and Hunter be Shawn and Hunter.
Yeah, but you also lose Shawn by March.
By April next year, March, April, right?
But now, think about it. In March of '98, if Austin doesn't exist, your roster doesn't have Austin. You don't have Brett. You don't have Shawn. I agree with what Ernest was saying before. The Rock wasn't there yet. You know what I mean? He was almost there.
I don't think we lose Shawn.
What? But I mean, he was injured.
He was injured in the match.
Shawn might have been dead by '98. The way he was going, he might have been dead.
His injury was in a match against Undertaker where he hit the casket.
Yeah, Rumble '98.
Yeah, that match doesn't exist because fucking Vince gives Brett what he wants, leans back on fucking Brett. Fucking Brett keeps the title in Montreal, and it leads to fucking the Hart Foundation being the mainstay, which means another thing doesn't happen. Owen doesn't fucking die.
That's a good point too. But again, Shawn Michaels may not make it.
Okay, if Shawn Michaels doesn't make it because Shawn Michaels makes poor life choices, that's one thing. I don't think we lose Shawn Michaels to injury because I don't think that match happens.
That makes sense. That's valid.
He blew his back out in a spot in a casket match. That doesn't happen if Austin doesn't come back.
I've always said that injury was a blessing in disguise for him, honestly.
I mean, look.
And I say that as someone that says that run is my favorite HBK run of all time. Right there, 97, 98.
I'll even say this. Even in the scenario where Brett still leaves, but Austin doesn't come back, I don't think you're having Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker as the title match at Royal Rumble. I think you're probably depending on that to be your title match at WrestleMania. Because those are your two biggest stars. Especially arguably, those were your two biggest stars at the point when Brett left, even with Austin around, because Austin was still on the come up. That's kind of the whole point of the question is we weren't in a world yet where Austin was this super established over character.
Right.
We were on the come up towards that. He comes back from the injury, and then it's to the moon, Alice.
And Vince, and then the Vince angle completes it.
Right, exactly.
It gives you an extra 2 years.
Exactly.
And to boot, you say Attitude Era is a little overrated. Here's why. When we did have Austin, that WWE roster in '98 until probably early '99 was pretty thin. You think about it. You think of it. You lose HBK in March, number one for injury. Okay, it's Austin, it's McFoley, it's Triple H. The Rock is still coming.
Right.
I mean, Triple H, he's not all the way live yet either.
Say it again?
Triple H isn't all the way live.
Exactly. Even more reason. So it's still Austin Vince literally carried that for a whole year, even '98. Once The Rock picked up in late '98, then you had more security in that point.
What I'll say is that we're not thinking about here. Boston goes down to injury. What's the one route that we haven't discussed yet?
Hogan coming back?
Vince going and getting somebody from WCW.
Savage and Hogan were possibly come back. That was been rumored for years.
I know that Hogan or Savage was the guy that should go get there.
But it was rumored, I'm saying. I'm not saying you had to get the guys. I'm saying that was rumored.
If Hogan or Savage had been the guy that came back,
it wouldn't have been anything.
Right, like maybe the company does in fact get out of the gutter financially and still exist today and stuff, which I'm just gonna say for the record and not to go off too much. I'm amused at the idea that there is a alternate reality somewhere where, WWE in fact went out of business because Austin was injured and didn't come back, and you never had the Austin and Tyson thing. And then WCW still went out of business circa 2001 because Ted Turner, Time Warner, whatever their company name was still like, I'm done with the wrestling business. And then all of a sudden, pro wrestling as we know it is totally different today.
Yeah.
I don't even know that we're doing a podcast right now about pro wrestling because I don't know that anybody cares.
And it sounds silly to say Hogan and whatever, but Freeze for 97, he was arguably still the biggest name in pro wrestling at that point.
But
the other way.
If you're going for that, like the attitude type thing, and if you're going for the everyman, remember, Austin worked because he reminded people of themselves. He was the everyman. I go to work, I have a shitty day, I go home, I drink some beers, I complain about my boss. Except he got to complain about his boss to his boss's face, sometimes while kicking him in the gut and giving him a stunner. So that was what people enjoyed about Austin. If you were trying to replace Austin, which, again, I don't know that you can actually full-on replace Austin.
No, I don't.
The one guy I think you could have gotten from WCW, and I don't actually think you could have gotten him because of his allegiance to certain people in the company, would have probably been Diamond Dallas Page.
At that time, he was way over. Absolutely.
And not only was he way over, the Diamond Cutter was way over.
Yes.
And that's what he needed. Because half the excitement of Steve Austin was he's going to hit a motherfucker with a stunner, who knows when, who knows where. It's the reason why Randy Orton still has a successful career.
Oh, no,
Austin, in a lot of ways, you think about it, I'll say it again, Steve Austin literally saved Vince because, again, 1998 was not really impressive in terms of storylines for the WWE outside Austin and Vince. Like, you had a little bit of Rock and Triple H, good matches during SummerSlam, all that. But overall, the product wasn't really that exceptional at that time. It was literally the Austin Vince show for a whole year.
Still in a rebuilding phase.
Right.
What they had for themselves, what they got lucked out with having, was a top program that would bring the audience in and then give all the guys in the process of building, they give them the chance to actually build in front of an audience, because the audience was there for the bigger overall show. And it's like, well, we're here, we might as well watch this Mark Henry and D'Lo Brown match.
It also allowed The Rock to develop. It allowed Triple H to develop. It allowed Mick Foley to become, a legend. So yeah, Austin and Vince gave that company a whole extra year, a buffer time to grow.
Yes, I agree.
By 99, they were.
I was waiting to say either that or you have to pee.
Nope, I got a light bulb.
Okay.
Talked about bringing somebody in that changed the game.
Is it Logan?
Yes, it is.
Someone that could, you go get DDP. A name that they could have brought in if Austin can't return. That has a very explosive finishing maneuver that the fans loved to see.
Yoshihashi?
Close.
Jushin Thunder Liger.
That's my second choice.
Of course.
Number
Barca.
Rob Van Dam.
He definitely would have helped. Well, certainly wouldn't be Austin level, but it would have helped.
In 98, he would have come over. He would have had the most over finishing maneuver in the fucking business.
Right.
His Star Frog Splash was fucking the most ridiculous thing to fucking watch. And if you could have Abu to lay off the drugs and brought them in together, it would have been a whole nother fucking level of fucking national attention to two really good wrestlers in ring. Pair them with the Eddie Guerreros and the Perry Saturns and the Dean Malenkos of the world, and have those matches that they were having at the ECW arena in 95 on a SummerSlam card. And you're talking about probably some of the best matches in wrestling. But long-term storytelling.
Yeah.
Brett doesn't leave. Brett retains the title at Survivor Series.
Yes.
Brett drops it.
Rumble Mania, whatever.
No, he probably drops it to Taker at Rumble.
Okay.
Wins the Rumble from the 30 spot. We get Shawn versus Taker at WrestleMania. You get Brett versus Owen after Owen turns on Brett and leaves the Hart Foundation. You have I don't know what the tag team scene was like there, but you probably have
New Age Outlaws had just gotten hot at that point.
And then you have and Rock for the Intercontinental title on the lower card.
I have a crazy idea.
Go right ahead, man.
What about a scenario where Brett stays, but the Montreal Screwjob still happens?
That's 100% on the table.
Because there's a lot of people that aren't convinced that it wasn't all work anyway.
I could see that being a thing. Brett goes away for a couple months and then comes
back and gets to be the face, who gets to be the kick-ass. He already had kind of an attitude. Like, he never would have been Stone Cold. He never would have been that level.
Wins the Rumble as the 30th entry, like
right.
a surprise entry, wins the Rumble and gets the redemption at WrestleMania.
But it does create the Mr. McMahon character, though.
You need the Mr. McMahon character. Like, if we're losing Austin to history, we can't lose Mr. McMahon to history, too. I know how tied together they are, but you could have still had someone to go against the Mr. McMahon character.
I agree.
If you don't have that character, then you've lost, like you said, you've lost the reason why people were tuning in during a year that you're actually just building up a whole roster.
No, this is a fantastic what if. And again, you tie it with the Bret Hart stuff, and it's literally the same exact time this happens. That's definitely a great what if.
You want to drop the dynamite drop in, Donnie?
No. I'm good. Joe, what did you love this week?
Dynamite drop in?
Hold on. I think Craig might drop in. Hold on.
No, I mean, I'm just thinking of, with his injury and I don't know if I'm on the same wavelength as you guys, but so the injury shortens his career, and what if the injury, I'm just thinking, what if the injury doesn't happen? How much longer does the Attitude Era keep going? Because he's the one character they couldn't tone down because
technically it didn't even start until after the injury. Technically, it didn't start till November of that year.
Yeah, but what he's saying
no, because the Attitude Era ended around 2003.
And it obviously took...
No, it ended in
01.
Okay, it ended in 2001 soon as Austin turned heel, which would have still happened.
When did he retired in what, 03, 04?
03.
He retired in 03, but the Attitude Era ended in 01.
It started shifting away from Rock and Austin at that point.
Soon as he turned heel and joined with
the band, went little into 03, 04.
Well, the other thing is you have to remember is when you get to 03, The Rock's filming movies, and Austin isn't an everyday compartment of the roster because he's been so dinged up. So they've started to transition to the Ruthless Aggression era.
Right.
If Austin doesn't get hurt, you may get another year before the end of the Attitude Era. Because
the only reason I don't think so is because I think he still would have turned heel in 01. And like I said, I think that's the real end of the Attitude Era.
I mean, Craig, that Mania in 03, they didn't even main event that Mania. That was Angle and Lesnar in 03.
The botched shooting star. The botched
star press.
So, but it's a great what if, though, because it changed the course of history, honestly.
Yeah. I'll say this. If it was...
say it with your face toward the camera. I can't see you. Thank you.
If that WrestleMania 19 was WrestleMania 38, Austin and Rock closed the show.
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Without question.
And Rock would have come back. Rock would have come back from Austin's last match. I don't care if he's the biggest movie star in the world. I don't care if he needed to be at the red carpet for Fast and Furious 87 that night. He would have been there for Austin's last match.
But that was Vince's playing the long game. Angle and Lesnar's future.
Especially if they knew that
it was going to be his last match.
If they knew it was one last round, Rock ain't missing it, and it ain't not